For disorganized play, it's time for disorganized play. Let's all get together and have an opinion. Hey, it's me. I am your chief opinion haver, Tom Lommel, aka the Dungeon Bastard, as it says directly below me. Um, we are going to have more of a instructional DM chat today than we are necessarily going to have a recap chat from last night. For those of you who are not familiar with the format here, the things that happen is on Tuesdays, I prep my weekly D&D game, or at least talk about the things that I need to do in order to prep my D&D game. On Wednesday, I run that game live here on Saving Throw Show, 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons game. We're currently just polishing up the Sunless Citadel. We had our big boss fight last night, and so for those of you who are so inclined to join in and follow the action, you can catch that either here on our videos that are above my head or to the side of my head. Depends upon whether you're watching on Twitch or YouTube. We love all those Twitch subs and follows if you don't mind. YouTube is there for your convenience, to be frank. We do not make any money off of YouTube. Finally, on Thursdays, after I've run my game, I come and talk to you all about how it went, and how things went differently than I expected, and how things could have been better, and how things went really great, and what we learned, and what we can look forward to. And then the following Tuesday, I prep a whole new session. So, that is the basic premise. However, today we're not going to do so much of a recap, although I thought it was a very successful session last night, and it went well, and I enjoyed it, and I believe the players did too, far more than maybe they would have enjoyed it the week before when we had some technical difficulties. But I have somehow instigated a firestorm of controversy out there on the Twitters because I think random encounters suck. And I admittedly say that to be provocative, but I also find it to be largely true. To be fair, there can be random encounters that do not suck. We're going to try and take a look at that today, too. If you enjoy using random encounters in your game, great. The genesis of this whole conversation was Sly Flourish said, "What's a piece of game prep that is a waste of your time?" And I said, "Coming up with random encounter tables," at least as they are commonly presented, right? So that's our frame for this discussion today. Let's take a look at what our discussion involves. So, we're going to talk random encounters. The purpose of them, ostensibly their origins, basically. The tension that they introduce into the game, in my opinion, the lack of tension thereof. The play experience, what it's actually like to run a random encounter. And then we're going to talk about fixing it, which is just sort of my take on, all right, so we've thrown all this stuff out there. Here are the issues, here are the problems. Can you have good random encounters? And of course the answer is yes, you can. Right? They wouldn't have survived this long if they totally suck. But I think it's an artifact of a bygone age which we should not feel beholden to. All right, and then finally I'm going to talk about boss fight shenanigans. There's some things that happened last night in our big boss fight that I switched up, changed, sort of broke the game in a variety of ways, etc., etc. Mr. Mike Shea himself is here. Thank you so much for giving us some Twitch Prime love. Very much appreciated. So, yeah, if you have questions for Sly Flourish, you can let those fly in the chat as well. So, with all of that in mind, let's talk a little bit. I want to give voice to some things that I expressed on Twitter that, you know, Twitter has its own natural limitations that don't allow me to fully explain or put caveats on or espouse my nuanced viewpoint in the most straightforward manner. So I want to really kind of like put 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 some words to some vocal words. I want to express my thoughts directly, as opposed to trying to keep them into 140 characters and threading them and worrying about, oh, are we on number 18 or 19? Which one was it? Whatever. So let's talk about that. And right off the bat, I will say your mileage may vary. So if you love random encounter tables and they work great for you and you find no reason to change them or dispense with them, that's great. Me personally, I think I have rolled on a random encounter table. I've rolled on a random encounter table a handful of times every adventure. It never ends up being particularly enjoyable. S. Del Castillo, I remember the Wandering Damage table from infamous Dragon number 96, one of the first April Fool's issues, and I have to 100% agree that when I read the Wandering Damage table, it was the most hilarious thing that I had. That whole issue, actually, with No Guard and all the things. If there's one issue of Dragon magazine you should probably go back and check out, it's Dragon 96 with the weird mechanical dragon on the cover. It is a delight and a charm, and I think that it holds up to this day. All right, so let's dive into our material here a little bit, right? So what's the purpose of a random encounter? Generally, it is to do a couple things. Number one, it's supposed to introduce some realism to the game, right? So that the world is a little bit alive and there's other things going on other than the adventure as set forth in the module. It shows some hustle and bustle, people travel, and so that's one thing, is like demonstrate that the world that the players are adventuring in is in fact dynamic, right? That's part of it. Secondly, I think they are there to provide some time and resource pressure on the players, right? In a weird kind of like unstructured way, right? So if they're journeying from the manor house to the temple in the middle of the swamp, they may have some random encounters with some lizard men or a group of tribesmen or a frog hemoth or whatever the case is, right? All that stuff is laid out for you. And part of the purpose there is to get the players involved in a fight that may eat some resources, that might eat some time away from what they're supposed to be doing, right? So you put some combat pressure on them in order to kind of up the stakes, or conversely to deny them opportunities to rest, right? Oh, you can't camp in the swamp because you're going to get a random encounter I'm going to roll every hour. Okay, well, we'll just keep pushing through. Now, those are all fine, well, and good, right? Those are the express stated purposes of a random encounter. I'm going to flip that around, which is those story techniques, and really what this is a way for you to sort of to heighten the stakes in what's going on in your adventure, or to bend things a little bit and increase the temperature of what's happening, right? Or to simply like flesh out the world a little bit. Those purposes are all well and good. Those are 100% valid, and I have deployed them myself, and I think they're an important part of the game. So the purposes of them is not something I'm going to deny. I think the implementation is extremely poor. Okay? And we'll get to that when we get to the play experience. Let me move on, I think, to the tension, because we get the purpose of those are the main purposes of a random encounter, right? Show the world is more alive than just what's 100% germane to the plot. Put combat pressure, drain the party of resources before they get to some other scripted encounter. or deny them safe passage through an area. I would say those are the three main purposes of a random encounter. If something else occurs to you, throw it at me. I'm keen to hear it. But and I haven't made extensive notes here. I've just been thinking about this all day. So off the top of my head, those are the three main purposes. All right. The implementation of it, I think, sort of indicates Gary's propensity for making actuarial tables for anything that could possibly come up in Dungeons and Dragons. And again, don't get me wrong, I love charts and tables and the places where random chance can lead you to get inspiration. I don't think that the weight that is given to a random encounter and the way that it is deployed, at least traditionally, is interesting or appropriate. All right, so that's that. Part of the argument for random encounter tables is that it provides a certain amount of tension. And that expresses itself sort of in two different ways, right? One is the whole, like I said, denying the players in the party an area to rest, which is it heightens the stakes because you got to keep pushing on, you don't know what's out there, etc., 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 right? So this sort of fear of the unknown is how it's positioned. You know, danger could be around any corner. That's one thing. I'm gonna take some notes, just so I can come back to. So I can come back to some points. All right. So I made this point on Twitter, but I think it's important to understand, right? That I don't believe there is, in fact, any tension attached to a random encounter. And in order to create drama, in order to create suspense, the players need to be worried about something, right? She needs to be... Somebody mentioned something about the game last night. I just said she. Your players need to fear for their safety. They need to fear for maybe their equipment or their valuables. Is anything going to get stolen here? They need to fear for something that they've been tasked with, like whether that's a loved one, whether that's someone that they're escorting, you know, that we're on a mission to protect this person, or it could be something that is peripheral, that's important to them, such as a loved one, etc., right? A relative, that sort of thing, right? But the important thing is, those things need to feel as if they are under threat. Let's talk about an in-game example. Party checks into an inn for the night. They see a man with a black eye patch who seems to be picking his fingernails with a silver dagger. He's got scars all the way up and down his arm. His clothes look worn and rugged. And everybody else seems to sit sort of away from him. The players, for whatever reason, don't approach him during the course of the night. But one of them notices, when you go upstairs to go to your room, he very quickly goes over and pays his tab. All right? You have given the players information that it's plausible for them to be concerned, for them to be worried that this guy's an assassin. They probably want to find out more information before they even go up to their room. It's this guy. I want to go talk to this guy. Who's around? Why is there? I'm going to go talk to somebody who's sitting away from him. I'm going to ask the barmaid if she knows who this guy actually is. Is he a threat? We're setting the table for stakes to get raised. Okay, we're setting the table. It says, okay, there's something that needs your attention, that you need to focus on. Here's a detail. It's important. And it might impact your ability to sleep. It might impact your ability to walk out with the same number of gold pieces that you walked in with. It might impact your mortality. You may wake up in the morning with a slit throat, which is not a great way to wake up. All right, so that's storytelling, right? That is setting forth the encounter or a potential encounter. It is raising the stakes, and it is creating awareness. And then the players now, even if they don't do something about it, they think about like, oh, okay, there's going to be discussion around the table about that. For better or for worse. But generally, you would introduce that sort of detail to make players feel uneasy, maybe deny them rest because they have to take extra watches. Make them feel like maybe we need to leave tonight. So this guy's chasing. This guy's clearly, maybe he's tagging us. He's following us. Somebody gave a heads up. We should try to slip away, right? But all of those things create drama. We're going to confront him. They create suspense. Who is this guy? What does he want from us? I don't know. Nobody will say anything. Okay? It fulfills those objectives that you have listed under the stated purpose of random encounters. Here's how an actual random encounter works in play most of the time. Oh, okay, you guys check in for the night. It's there's not much going on. It seems like a relatively peaceful evening at the inn. You have some delicious soup and a big haunch of mutton, and you drink as many beers as you are so inclined to drink, and you all head off to bed and bunk down for the night. Roll dice. And you wake up 8 hours later, and then everything's fine, right? Like, the players are not aware of what's on that random encounter table, okay? There's no awareness on their side of the screen that says, oh, these are the possible things that could come and attack you. All right, it could be anything from a innocent stable boy spills a bucket of water out in the yard to a frost giant bashes through the back wall and starts dismantling the fireplace. Right? Those things could all be on your little random encounter chart that you as the DM are sitting there looking through. But the players don't know that. And so they can't be afraid of, you can't build tension off something that you don't know exists. And I brought this up on Twitter, which is people talk about everything's set in the dark. Why is the dark so scary? Well, the dark in and of itself is not particularly scary, right? It's something that we encounter on literally a nightly basis, right? But what is scary about the dark is that strange thing you hear. That odd burning smell that suddenly fills your apartment. What makes the dark scary is what it is, the very specific things that it is hiding, not the fact that it is a vehicle for hiding things, right? The fact that it's opaque or however you want to describe it. But it's not things that are the unknowable is not inherently frightening. The rest of my afternoon is unknowable. What could happen this afternoon? I could trip on the stairs and break my leg in the next 2 hours. I could have a car accident later tonight. God forbid I don't. I could inherit a large sum of money from some distant relative that I was not aware of, right? All of those things are possibilities. but they're all inherently unknowable, or not inherently unknowable. They're all unknown to me, and they're all unlikely, and I have no awareness of them, so I don't have any suspense or drama attached to going down the stairs or getting in my car or opening my mailbox. It doesn't mean anything to me. And the problem, the fundamental problem with random encounters brings us to our next point, which is the play experience. I've already largely demonstrated it for you, right? Fuckwad points out, I could book a great gig. My phone could ring and I could be in a commercial campaign. Starts next week. Can you book out all week? Yes, I can. Those things are all plausible. But if I don't have awareness of them or a reason to be afraid of them or concerned about them, then there's no way for me to get invested in them. And you can't have drama and suspense or tension without some sort of investment. There has to be something at stake. Right? So the reason that this all is problematic is the play experience is completely opaque. I like this. All right. The play experience is completely opaque to the players on the other side of the table, right? When we play D&D, one person sits here in the Dungeon Master's chair and talks with the players, and we have an interchange back and forth, and the game ebbs and flows just naturally, right? Oh, okay, well, now what's the next thing? And there is no, like, demarcation. There's no big flag that you hold up. There's no red light that comes on or devil horns that appear over your head to go, okay, well, now it's time to check for random encounters. And so when you, as the DM, sit here and look at something on the book, it's just like you're looking for anything else in the book. And then you roll some dice, and you go, okay. 3 lizard men approach you from out of the bush. There is nothing about that experience that signals to the player, number one, this is not something that's unscripted, that is just added in randomly. That's not part of the plot. And number 2, there's nothing in there that says, like, oh, okay, you dodged a bullet because you got the 3 lizard man encounter and you didn't get the froggemoth coming out of the swamp encounter. Like, they can't feel relieved about it, right? If your random encounters are not foreshadowed in any way, then you're not notching up the tension. You're not building suspense or drama. You're not putting pressure on the players. Things are just happening to them. Just like everything else just happens to them. Okay? And if you are foreshadowing your encounters, well, then I would begin to argue that you're not truly having random encounters, right? You're just having pre-planned encounters, which you are picking at random. In which case, why roll the dice at all? Let's see. Well, I got 3 lizard men. I got the wandering merchant. And I got the froggemoth. You know what? They've got so many hit points. F those. I'm going to send the froggemoth after them. Be a DM who can make a decision. Right? So that's the fundamental problem with random encounters, is that the play experience is based around this wargaming paradigm that says every 6 turns, roll a d6, and on a roll of 1, consult the following table, and one of the following encounters happens. And you may say to yourself, oh, well, that's just something Gary put back in the game like 40 years ago. It's not, doesn't happen that often. You know, it's not, we've gotten rid of that. No, we have not. Okay? If we look just 15 years ago, there's a wandering monster table in the Sunless Citadel. In areas 6 and beyond, monsters move through the halls of the Sunless Citadel. For every 12 hours the PCs spend in the dungeon, roll 1d20 on the following table where the PCs are in an accessible hallway or room. Blah, 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 blah. And what happens is, you roll a die, and let's do some quick math here. Each one of those is 5%. So 70% of the time, nothing happens. The other 30% of the time, a monster shows up. Why is it here? We don't know. What does it want? No idea. What is it going to do? Probably fight the players because we have not given you any other information as to what's going to happen here. Right? So that's like, this not in the current version of the Sunless Citadel, that's in the original module from 2000 and whatever it was. Whatever. Admittedly, 17 years ago, sure, have we come a long way? Yes and no. All right? But I would argue, no, we're over here. This is bad. It is a waste of your time. It is putting a lot of work on you. It is detracting from the flow of the game. It doesn't give you enough details to do anything interesting. And it's this artifact of an old wargaming mechanic that we just don't need. I'm not saying don't check for random events that might happen while the players happen to be in the dungeon. I'm not saying you don't want your dungeon to be dynamic, to put pressure on the player's ability to rest, to drain them of resources before a good fight. All of those things, the purpose of a random encounter, is important. I would argue that this fundamental play mechanic, that this play experience is not good. And you know what? You may be like me, where you grew up gaming with this, this thing that's kind of bolted into the adventure, right? And you may feel like, okay, you know what? I have enough experience dealing with this thing that I know how to finesse it. Oh, okay. Well, those kobolds, they're there to make a strike against the goblin forces. They're going to go and get some of their prisoners back, and they're looking for anyone who can help them out. Okay, well, what you just said was 50 times more interesting than what's on this chart. Now, if you're that kind of accomplished and experienced DM, that you're used to grabbing these things kind of by the handles and working with them and wrestling them into fulfilling the stated purpose that they are intended to be, there for, to be used for, then good, great for you. But why are we making the DM's job so much harder? And then why are we hiding the whole thing behind this, weird, opaque process where we pause the game and the players go, oh, does he not know what's going to happen next? And then you roll some dice and you go, oh, okay, well. And they're like, okay, what? And they're either writing it off because it's a meaningless combat encounter, or they're trying to find meaning in it because they don't know that it's just a random encounter. But nothing sort of like sucks the air out of a session more than this thing happens for no discernible purpose. And especially in a game where it takes so long to fight through a combat. Like combat eats time, and it eats little slices of individual attention, but collectively it eats the whole table, right? So you may only be involved in the fight for a total of 2 minutes of your own specific action, but around the table it might take 20 minutes because there's 4 other players in the DM. Okay. Well, don't put yourself in that kind of situation if you don't know, if you don't have an idea of how to get a payoff out of it. How does what's happening add information in any way? Right? Mike Shea brings up an interesting point. How do I feel about the random encounters in the recent D&D hardback adventures? Well, Mike, I'm glad that you brought that up. Let's take a look at something from the Storm King's Thunder. Let's make that... Wait, what is this? Oh, yeah. Okay. All right. So, this is one of the... So, Storm King's Thunder has a whole, essentially, like, beginning of a chapter. There's one chapter of Storm King's Thunder where part of it is a gazetteer. This is how all these towns relate, or this is a brief sort of like one paragraph description of a bunch of different locations around the Sword Coast. But then the preface of this whole thing is this huge kind of encounter matrix. And it's literally like, okay, if they're in the mountains, roll percentile dice, this might happen. If they're in the hills, then roll percentile dice, these things might happen, etc., 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 right? So this is an encounter with orcs. The characters come across 3d6 plus 2 orcs. There's a 25% chance that these orcs have prisoners in tow. A sample group of prisoners is presented here, but you can create others. It goes on to detail who the prisoners might be, where they're from, what the orcs did with them, what treasure might be available if you actually help the prisoners out, etc., etc., etc. Now, this is great. This has... it is imbued with purpose. Yes, you still arrive at it using a random roll, but it tells something about the greater world around you, about something that's going on. It has a payoff if you decide to pursue this storyline with these prisoners who just want to be escorted back home. It still has the potential to really derail the focus of the group and where they're heading, but it's far easier to take this encounter and know how to run it and know how to tweak it than it is to take this encounter and know. Honestly, I can get this out of the back of the monster manual by just making some random die rolls, right? So I appreciate the effort that has been put into creating these random encounters. Not every one is this intricate and detailed. There are still plenty of encounters that's like, you meet a band of elves. Okay. They can escort you if you offer them money or whatever. I mean, even that's a better encounter than what we've talked about before. So this is one way of fixing it, right? I don't know that setting out rules for these are when you need to, how often you need to make checks, and this is what you need to roll in order to have an encounter, etc., 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 right? But this is one way of fixing it. I think trying to think what else I want to say in terms of this. I mean, I like this, right? But I also think that there was a dedicated effort to put this type of random encounter in this book because there was so much overland travel, and it was implausible for the party to go all the way from Triboar to Silvery Moon without having something happen to them. That's implausible. You can't have too much to happen to them on the way because it's just supposed to be a scene on the road. But you got to have something happen to them. And so for that adventure, they wrote, whatever it was. Like, I'm gonna rough guess. There's 40 or 50 random encounters in there, right? Maybe more. Maybe there's 60 or 80. But that's a huge chunk that they had to dedicate because there was such a need for all this travel back and forth. Because that's such an integral part of Storm King's Thunder is that you go someplace for the first 3 or 4 chapters until finally they're like, okay, thank God we don't have to write any more of these things because they probably burned a bunch of them out. We're just going to invent this thing called teleportation circles, and you can just like hop, skip, and a jump, bam, bam, bam between Neverwinter and Waterdeep and wherever you need to go, right? Like they obviate the need halfway through for random encounters. And as S. Del Castillo points out, it's a sandbox style of adventure. So let me just go back to that for one moment, which is if you're running a sandbox style game, or you want to run something that's incredibly freeform and yet has some structure that might lead you to interesting places, then random encounter tables might be the great fit for you. And even if you're not running that style game, if it's a great fit for you, good for you. But enjoy. by all means. This is my personal take, that I think the random encounters, traditionally as they have been set up, do not make for a riveting and engaging play experience. Now, this is one fix. It involves a lot of writing. And I'll tell you one thing, you get attached to these things. If you're going to make them up yourself, oh, it's a cool encounter. You're going to start cheating. You're just going to drop it in. Oh, yeah, wasn't a good that. No, you know what? Actually, I do want this to happen. Why are we fiddling around with like DM roulette? Will a cool encounter happen? Roll, no, roll, no, roll. Oh, I got a good one. It's a game that you just enjoy on your side of the screen, and the rest of the table has no idea that it's going on. And if they did find out that it was going on, they'd be like, oh, I don't know, guys. Should we even bother talking to this merchant? He's just a random encounter. Okay? I don't think that play experience is great. Where I see the role of random encounters falling is a couple places. One, they can be random events that, if they're designed like this, if they're designed with a purpose to illuminate a greater part of the world or foreshadow something that's coming. So, for instance, if you have deserters from the Orcish military who are pouring out of the woods, just bands of like, and they're all burnt and scarred, and their equipment is charred, etc., and give the player some rolls. Okay, what is this foreshadowing? There's some sort of fire creature that they're running away from. Maybe it's a dragon, maybe it's a demon, maybe fire elementals are loose, or there's a pyromancer, whatever it is, right? But that's a random encounter that foreshadows something that's happening down the road. That creates awareness in the player's mind of like, oh, guys, maybe we should get some fire resistance potions or spells going. Maybe we should whatever it is, right? So you can use them to foreshadow parts of the world, or explain some other kind of like mystery part of the world that doesn't really, that wouldn't be obvious, or maybe it's something that the players have been wondering about for a long time. You can have the encounter illuminate parts of the world that would otherwise be hidden. It's a way to convey clues and hints that is essentially like a drop-in event that could kind of come anywhere. But when they hear this, they learn that it turns out that the reason everybody in this village is sick is because someone is dumping garbage upstream out of the silver mine, and it's poisoning the water. Right? So those are the two of the main ways that you can use random encounters, and you can also, I think it all comes into providing a context, like providing more information. And the problem, like this provides some more information, right? It doesn't provide any information about the main plot, but it provides, it's like a side quest. This provides no information. Mouse is not working today. So that's a problem. No, we are not talking about spoilers. So that's... I had another point about that, but I don't remember what it is off the top of my head. All right. So the other way that I think you can use quote-unquote random encounter tables to liven up your game and to make things more interesting is you can use them to write like parts of hooks or parts of interesting things that you would then combine into a heretofore unknown but interesting result, right? So you might have a column of weird PC occupations: cobbler, alchemist, smithy, healer. You might have another column that would have one odd trait: missing a leg, wears an eye patch, has runes going right down the center of their face, all the way down the middle of their chest and into their clothing. speaks louder than they need to, right? And then you could pair that with some sort of want, need, or purpose. Looking for their sister. Trying to get 2 more gold so that they can book a passage on a stagecoach or on a caravan and get out of town. Recently burned themselves and is looking for help. The fourth purpose might be as simple as wants to celebrate their birthday, right? Okay. Now, if you create a random encounter table like that, which is not really a random encounter table, but what you're really creating is you're creating adventure hooks and seeds, or NPC hooks and seeds, which you then can combine into an NPC that could approach them and be interesting and fresh and spontaneous, that you haven't put a lot of thought into. But boom, you've got a compelling NPC who wants something that the party can interact with them, that has role-playing hooks and attributes that the party can pick up on and either ask about or deal with or whatever, right? So in terms of an inspirational tool for improvisation, those types of random charts can be immensely useful for making your game unique and interesting and allowing you to, as someone said today on Twitter, is like allowing you to surprise yourself. Okay, well that's far more surprising than it is to write up a 3-paragraph encounter of the orcs who are dragging the prisoners, and you get invested in that, you know exactly what it is, but it's fixed, right? It's fairly static, and you're attached to that. You're not attached to a chart of random stuff. So, that would be my suggestion, is create random encounters that are tied to a purpose with the rest of your story, that somehow either intersect with the world in a meaningful way, intersect with your characters in a meaningful way, and or intersect with the plot lines that are developing in a meaningful way, right? Doesn't mean they have to be super specific, doesn't mean that you're creating things that are going to like railroad the players down one particular path or anything like that. But the point is, you want to use those random encounters to create and raise awareness, and create and provide context and connections, or at least the availability of connections. In other words, random encounters are really just your opportunity to introduce Schrodinger's clues into your games. Clues, pieces of information that are ripe with potential to be connected to a bunch of different things, but don't necessarily have to be specifically linked to this specific thing and it follows this storyline this way, right? All right, let me go back through and just tackle a few of the comments, because I've kind of been ignoring chat as I've been gabbing on here and trying to get this out into a moderately cogent format here. All right. I'm going to tackle this one quickly. This is actually off topic, Joe Lacoste. For the play experience, what would you recommend if a player is rolling really poorly for the entirety of the game session and is getting frustrated? So here's my advice. I think you need to actually break the game a little bit, right? There's a couple ways you can do that within the rules, and then there are some ways that I would suggest you do that outside of the rules. Within the rules, give that player inspiration for whatever reason. You whiff with your sword. You are having such an incredible streak of bad luck. There's no way that it can continue. You hand them inspiration. Boom. Now they have advantage that they can spend if they want. The other thing that I would suggest, that's within the rules. Outside of the rules, what I would suggest, also within the rules is let there be some interesting consequences for their failure. Let it at least advance the story somehow, or provide some detail or some insight. Even you miss, but you notice that as your blade swings by and you look down, that there is a strange crease in the leather armor that is strapped to their legs. It looks like it's not very well secured at all. So give them some benefit to rolling poorly. Like give them a little bump, a little something extra, even though you missed. Oh, you did pick this out. Finally, I would say one way to do this is when they miss, either each time that they miss, or if they miss twice in a row, or if they miss 3 times in a row, give them a little power token. And say, all right, you know what? You've missed twice in a row. You've earned a +1 on your next roll, or you've earned this token can be traded in for a +2 whenever you want, etc. But I would say as they continually fail, start giving them a little like cushion insurance against their bad dice luck, because there's nothing worse than having your entire game ruined because your dice couldn't roll above an 11. All right. We talked about that. Yeah, I mean, I do agree that the encounters in the books have a lot more to offer for novice DMs than the original than the original format. But yes, knowing when to roll is definitely part of the art of DMing. Mike Shea says, instead of building random encounters, how about just building encounter encounters? Absolutely. Like, and I think, you run the risk of not using them or being so inspired to use them that you kind of like shoehorn them in there when they maybe don't belong. I think there's a certain number of improvisational DMs who want to use random encounters as inspiration for how to push their story forward. Like Texas Devin has said, like, I can't work with a blank page, but you give me some prompts and I can go someplace. And I would argue that this format, go away. Well, it's not even prep day, guys. That this format doesn't really provide you with, it's so specific, it doesn't provide you with great inspiration. It's too specific to provide you with great inspiration. And this chart is too sparse to actually provide you great inspiration. Stop. All right. BSB Care asks, for a party traveling, you would have an encounter if they travel from A to B and A to C, but a different one if they decided to travel from B to D. I asked that for Mr. Mike Shea. I'm not sure how to answer that one. All right. So, so Texas Devin, I want to bring back something about randomized dungeons and the fact that they don't contribute to a good... I think you can have a randomized dungeon that is married to a good story structure. It's a topic for another day, but if you look at the spine of a Dungeons & Dragons adventure as the party goes to investigate an area, they clear part of it and then find out that the plot is actually more complicated than they thought. They suffer through more adversity, and then at some point they journey through difficult terrain into a showdown with the boss monster, right? If you just very crudely divide an adventure arc into those 4 or 5 segments, it's my belief that you could create a deck of cards for each of those segments and essentially create an adventure where I have a deck that says who my big boss is. I have a deck that says this is how the twist is revealed, that it's more difficult than they think. I have a deck that says this is my weird location where you're going to have to overcome in order to get to the big boss. If you could create those, create that structure and then fill those silos with interesting options, you could in fact have a story created out of whole cloth using random cards. I think the way most people use random dungeon cards is terrible. I don't think it's good story structure. I don't think it's good play experience. All right. Yeah, it's important. You know, trust me, I love improv and I love a good suggestion. So, yesterday's session was session 9. Yes. All right. So I think we've covered a lot of this stuff. So in Storm King's Thunder, BSB Care asks, you pre-rolled some of the random encounters to make them seem less random. Would you suggest continuing with that or just using it from time to time? I think it really depends upon the context of your play experience, right? So I was playing an Adventurers League game in the game shop. We had to get through this material essentially as written, although I did heavy editing and I did some remixing, and I certainly took equivalent creatures from other areas and plugged them into parts of my adventure. And I'll be the first to admit, I strayed far off the rails by the time it was all over with. But I was trying to stay on board. And I wanted to pre-roll those encounters so I didn't have to have the boring one-sided DM's game of, okay, well, you guys are ready to move on, huh? You hit the road. Roll. Like, who's having fun watching that? Nobody else at the table. So I think it depends upon the context. When I'm playing now at the Saving Throw Studio, where we're not beholden to Adventurers League rules, and we don't have a fixed, like, this is how long the adventure has to run and when it's going to get out, then I would be more inclined to use sort of an inspiration table, if you want to put it that way. All right. What else? Would I, in essence, choose my own adventure? Yeah, I mean, there's somewhat to that. All right. Mike Schley asks a question. How do you feel about the Dwarven Forge Kickstarter? Have I done anything with that stuff? I have a bunch of the first 2 sets. I have the Caves and Caverns, and I have the very first one that they did. I honestly, I bought a whole box of that. Right now, it's taking up storage space for me. I find that it's, you know, if you can put the time into it, and you can, like, if I could go into the studio 2 hours early and set up an amazing Dwarven Forge setup, I would be so on top of that. I think that would be super rewarding. But I'm facing the reality right now where I look around my apartment and we're at the stage of what stuff do we get rid of as opposed to how do we fill this corner, right? So we are under a storage crunch here, in case you have not ascertained that already. It's difficult for me to get on board with, like, the amount of pieces that I would want, and balance that versus how often I would use them, and then what it would take me to store the stuff, right? That's, for me, is the tricky part. Is if I used it every week at my table. Now, I've considered, like with the castle setup that I've seen Sly Flourish post online, like, that would be great if, like, that was the Iron Keep for us. Like, that was home base, and we could, like, maybe, like, put it someplace in the studio and, like, wheel it out and, like, have the characters start there every week or whatever. It would be this fantastic home base and set piece. But because I tend to run stuff off the cuff and I'm not always sure where we're going to go or which path they're going to follow, it becomes prohibitive for me to invest the time in setting all that stuff up every week. And it also becomes, if I'm not going to set it up every week, then it becomes prohibitive for me to carve out the storage space to have it available when, on the occasions where I do need it, right? So, that's my quick take. I don't know if Amy and Eric are still with us. We're not doing that much of a recap today. I just ranted and raved for an hour about random encounters. So that happened. But let's talk a little bit about boss fight shenanigans from last week. Or from last night. A couple things, and I talked with the players about this after the game, so it's not super spoilery for them. But for those of you who have Tales from the Yawning Portal, or you're just following along with your own copy of the original Sunless Citadel, obviously things took a turn last night. Like last night's encounter, if you hadn't seen it going this way in the previous weeks, last night's was sort of the pinnacle of Tom decides to do a crazy remix on the material given to him and goes completely like to a totally different place. Now, my perspective on the Sunless Citadel is that it's sort of you got to keep in mind that it's keep in mind that it's also meant to be an intro adventure, right? Like it was one of the first 3E adventures, and like 3.0, not 3.5 or whatever. It was one of, if not the first 3E adventure. So there's a lot of kid gloves going on in this thing, right? It is designed with the express intent that the players are going to be learning the rules through the encounters that they have. And given that premise, they're going to be fairly vanilla encounters, right? You're not going to do a whole bunch of super weird, crazy, off the wall, rule bending, breaking type of stuff. You want to introduce the idea of searching for traps. You want to have a diplomacy check so that you can have a role-playing encounter, or you can want to have a role-playing encounter so you can have a diplomacy check. You want to, I don't know, did I already say find traps, etc.? You know, like you want to fight a dragon. Like you literally fight a dragon. In 3rd edition, that was sort of revolutionary, right? Like that was the big like, oh my god, I can't believe this is happening. We're 1st level, we can't fight a dragon. You're fighting a dragon now. So, if you keep in mind like when it was written and what the audience was for it, it is a perfectly serviceable job of what it's intended for. We're not at that point, right? 5th edition has been out for 3 years. We're not really trying to teach anybody how to play the game anymore. There's plenty of actual plays that they can pick up on. There's groups that they can join who are established in it, who can get everybody up to speed very quickly. Like, this adventure is no longer about showcasing the new edition, showcasing the new options and rules, and how they all function happily together as a whole. So, because we have a very traditional dungeon, in my opinion. I mean, yes, there's an evil tree at the end of it. And I don't mean this to disparage Bruce Cordell's work at all. I mean this as it's designed to do one thing. I'm coming at it from a different place and a different perspective. So, as we got deeper into the adventure, I started to stray further and further and further away from the plot line as scripted. Two reasons for that. One, of course, like I'm a creative, right? I think that's a big reason why most people DM is like they have creative impulses that they want to channel in a way that is compelling and engaging with an audience. And if you don't have the time, energy, talent, or inclination to go on a stage or to write a piece of public art, then at least you can get that sort of audience and engagement out of sitting down behind the DM screen with 4 or 5 players, right? Cool. So number one, I wanted a channel for my own creativity, things that I was fascinated with. This whole drug addiction angle that I thought brought the goblins to life in a new way and introduced a new twist on what's going on in the greater world. This bizarre relationship with Gingy the Poisoner and Belloc, and how Gingy wants the party to betray Belloc. You know, I think that character of Gingy the Poisoner is fascinating in terms of, he seems to be clearly evil, but he's striking a lawful evil. Very, you know, if nothing else, he's striking a lawful evil deal with the party. And as Estelle Castillo points out, we're building a story that's larger than just the Sunless Citadel, one thing, right? But also, and I am just by my very nature, I've always been fascinated with the astral plane and silver cords and all that kind of stuff, right? And I have found over the past 3 or 4 years that the best way to scratch that itch is to not wait till it's level appropriate. Just go head on at it. You want to get down and dirty and explore like what sort of weird martial organization the Githyanki culture is. Githyanki show up. Just have them show up. Give them some perfunctory reason. Get them involved. Get in the mix with those people. I wanted to do something weird with the astral plane. Great. Guess what? The Twilight Grove is no longer even on the same plane of existence. Get that out there. Engage with it. See what happens with it. Where does it take you? It's a DMing challenge. It's an opportunity to blow up the game in a different way. And I think that leads me to my second point, which is, as we start the Sunless Citadel, it's as simple as 2 people go missing and they've gone down this crack in the earth. Down, down, down. And then we encounter some little bit of weirdness. Okay, well, the kobolds it turns out they're having a fight. And they want to negotiate with you. And then it turns into an even bigger set of weirdness, right? Oh, okay, so we've now gotten involved with the goblins having this weird addiction. And then it goes even deeper. So my point being is, we start with sort of a fairly innocuous premise, and by the time we have gotten to the end of it, we're having this bizarre climactic battle with an unearthly overpowered tree, and at least in terms of the damage that it can withstand, in a pocket dimension where the players are manipulating the astral cords that are connecting all of these different people together. And we've suddenly gone from this mundane rescue mission into the realm of the absolute, like literally the realm of the fantastic. Now, is that sustainable? I don't know, but it does provide for a heightening of what's happening, a dramatic increase in how epic this particular thing is. And so that's the other purpose. Like, that's why, as we've gone along in the module, things have gotten more and more bizarre and gotten bigger and bigger and bigger, is because I'm trying to up the tempo. Now that they've defeated this evil and they've grappled with the truly weird circumstances that are at the bottom of this sunken citadel, which in and of itself is sort of a bizarre premise, right? But now that they've done that, we can have sort of a denouement. We can relax back into the natural world that we all understand. We go down the hill, we visit the mayor, we have an interrogation, there's rules, we talk to the parents, it's conversation, we maybe hunt some goblins or whatever. But, we return to ordinary everyday fantasy life. And that allows us to kind of like reset the bar for this is the level of weirdness that we're at. And here we go. Up the roller coaster again. So that's the reason that last night's kind of showcase combat was so weird and bizarre and took such a huge, like, felt like, oh, okay, well, now they've got all these temporary hit points and they can, and Tack is awakening powers that she never even knew she had, and this is happening and that's happening, etc. The reason for that is it's got to be the climax, it's got to be the payoff. And yes, the climax could be the party shows down with 5 dark elves and the middle of a street on a sad and moonless night in the middle of Waterdeep. But it could also be far more interesting if they were battling atop a spired bridge deep in the Underdark over a sea of bubbling acid while giant vampiric dire bats swung around in the darkness ready to loop down and feast upon any combatant who falls unconscious. So, part of it is my natural inclination to be creative and explore things. And then part of it is we need to have a climax. And honestly, part of it is this is a show for you guys, and we need to turn it up just another extra notch and make things that much more epic for you. And I think we were successful. I think, as BSB Care points out, it's a good thing that there were internet problems last week so that this battle could really kind of like come to its full fruition. I felt so much better about how it went last night than where we were going into it last week. It just did not have, the players weren't focused, they weren't there, they didn't really understand what the stakes were. And this week, like, coming in, they knew what the stakes were. They were all, it was a joyful thing to watch it turn from, God, is he really going to kill us? What is it with all these cards? This sucks. Why is this going on? To like, eventually they assume that, as the battle wears on, they assume their competence. They're like, well, we're going to stick it to this guy. I killed him. I will point out, that was not fudging, by the way. I was not like holding out hit points for Amy to make her big final psychic blow. That creature had 204 hit points, and she did 207. She brought it over the 207 threshold, so she killed it. That was not DM fudgery going on there. I don't remember who asked this. BSB Care says, was there a possibility of the party actually losing Dell if they didn't break the cage, or was it set to ratchet up some tension? So I will lift the DM curtain on that one a little bit. I knew that there was something happening with Dell, and I didn't take the time to make the notes on exactly what that deal was. But as the combat was going on, I was looking for another avenue to raise the stakes, because we had gotten into this kind of this like back and forth slugfest where the tree throws Grayson across the clearing, Grayson comes running back and attacks the guy, and then the tree grabs Grayson, throws him across the clearing. Like, we had fallen into what I would consider a too repetitive rhythm. And so to change things up, I was like, well, what if we threaten Dell? She's there for some sort of reason we can't anticipate. And we haven't really gotten around to how do we liberate her from this weird form that she's been shape-changed into. But I was like, let's get some skin in the game other than just everybody focus firing on the giant evil tree, because we've had several rounds of that, and also the tree is starting to run out of hit points, so let's take it up a notch, and this is the best way to do that. So, was there a legitimate chance of them actually losing Dell? I don't know if I would have made that call, because that's a pretty harsh penalty. Killing Gregory was obviously no big deal. They had no qualms about that. But losing Dell would have been heartbreaking for Amy's character. So if she would have gotten sucked into the mud, I don't know, I would have called for some tough rolls. And I would have encouraged them to burn some bumps. But I don't think it would have been as simple as she gets sucked into the mud, she disappears, and then it's over. But like I said, I have to be 100% honest. All I knew was that she wasn't connected to the tree; she was entrapped by it. And I'm like, well, if she's entrapped, then she must be being held for ransom or bait. So let's let's pay that part of the strategy off. I think it worked out. All right. If anybody else has any questions about anything we've talked about, go ahead and throw them at me. Otherwise, I'm going to start wrapping up here. I do want to mention to everyone who's a Patreon backer. I think this goes to everyone. So we have a Dropbox folder for our Patreon backers. I put the template for the cards for the Lords of the Twilight Grove that I used last night. I put that PDF in the Dropbox. So that's a relatively new edition. Look in the Iron Keep folder of your Patreon rewards, and you will see it there. And yeah, it's just got the names and then what attributes that they control. I thought that worked out fine last night. There are a few times where I forgot about its effects. There are a few times where I forgot to set the timer. I should have, in hindsight, added some sort of control or unlock mechanism where you could just lock it in for the rest of the night, because I think it did start to get a little tiresome to keep redrawing. Like, it started to get sucked of the drama and the meaning because it kept coming over and over and over and over again. So that's fine. It could have been tweaked a little bit. I may tweak the Lords of the Iron Keep based on those cards that I made last night. Although I like them having some sort of ambiguity to it. I might add those things onto the existing cards of the Iron Keep. So, yeah. So there's a thing. It was a thing where you could lock in one of the cards for the next shuffle, and then I reshuffled them again. So that part got a little bit muddy. You're right. It should have been something like you could lock that in for the rest of the night. That would have been a good way to handle it. That portion of how the donations interacted with the shuffle, that could use some workshopping. But I think it honestly maybe worked a little bit better than the normal Lords of the Iron Keep do. Food for thought. Food for thought. To answer your question, I mean, there was a random element to the cards already, so I was rolling 3d6 for how many minutes that was going to go, and sometimes it was as little as 7, and sometimes it was 9 or 13 or 15. I think one of them was even 18. So that wasn't necessarily all just me forgetting to reset the timer and whatnot. The timer was not fixed. The timer was based on a die roll. S. Del Castillo, have you decided what Yawning Portal dungeon we're running next? Yes, we are, and I told the players this too, so this is not spoiler territory for them. Hopefully they're not. They don't know much about it, but I have decided to run White Plume Mountain next. I think I talked about that last week. I have never run it, and I've never played it, so that's going to be interesting. I am planning to insert it as an extra-dimensional dungeon within the Iron Keep itself. So within the next couple of sessions, if you noticed last night at the very end of the session, they found a locket that that glowed faintly. That is actually the key to the Iron Keep. And when they do some more investigation upon that, it'll lead them to the Iron Keep. They'll be able to open up the extra-dimensional space in the Iron Keep, and that extra-dimensional space at this point that they can access is the dungeon of White Plume Mountain. So I need to start foreshadowing some elements about Wave and Whelm and Night Razor and all that kind of stuff, right? So those things need to find their way into the campaign in the next 2 sessions. I mean, we might wrap Sunless Citadel next session if they don't want to do much else in the dungeon and they just want to go back and have some interrogation time with the parents and the mayor. So then let's move on. Now it will be interesting because Yeah, he was running Bless. What was the other concentration spell? That's the one that I don't remember. Eric was he was firing off a few spells, but I think Bless was the only one, right? Uh, so we could potentially wrap up Sun of the Citadel in one session next. And I need to start having materials on hand or events on hand ready for them to like transition into White Plume Mountain whenever that. Oh, I know what I was going to say. What's tricky is they will be level 4 probably by the end of next week, right? Um, and White Plume Mountain like assumes that you're level 8 when you walk in there. Now, because of the advantages that they get from chat, they are obviously tougher than a regular level 4 party. They're not 4 levels tougher, but they might be 2 levels tougher. Between one cool thing and their ability to strategically deploy bumps and add up to a +3 on a roll, like they've got some juice. What they don't have is hit points. Yes, yeah, he smote. He didn't use magic weapon. He just smote. So, yeah. No, I think what it was is when he does a divine smite, all of his damage turns into like magical radiant damage or whatever. So, uh, yeah, and I agree with BSB Care that the party's just gonna have to play smarter and not be quite as reckless in their adventuring career. I think the other challenge looking forward to or looking ahead to White Plume Mountain is to make sure that there's enough role playing opportunities in that dungeon because it is extremely old school and it needs to have a little bit of it needs to go through and like do an editing pass on it where you go, well, how can we make this an interesting role playing encounter as opposed to like if it's a riddle or a puzzle, which is that thing is rife with, great, that should be fine. We are running D&D 5 is the answer to that question. So if it's a riddle or a puzzle, that'll be fine for this party. I'm worried that it's going to be short on role playing encounters, and so I need to look selectively through all of White Plume Mountain and find places where we can transform. And I don't know, there's some fun, fantastic combat encounters, so I want to keep those things in. You know, you're fighting inside of a bubble, you're surrounded by boiling water, that sort of stuff is amazing. So you want to keep those sort of signature type of encounters, but I want to make sure, okay, well, you know, you got to have somebody to talk to, somebody that helps give the place purpose or illuminates the complex in a way that might not otherwise be there. So, yeah, make sure they have enough healing potions. We'll figure that out. Yeah, who can cure wounds? Only, only Grayson, only the paladin. So they're short on that. That's a challenge that's intentional, right? Like I gave them access to chat provided healing stuff last night so that we could balance the fight against that giant boss monster. But I don't anticipate giving those types of. I want those goodies to be sort of rare and singular and deliberate rather than something that's ongoing that they can just lay back on. So yeah, I will take another pass. Or I need to honestly just start reading the thing and making notes, and we'll embark upon a lot of that journey together in terms of this room doesn't make a lot of sense, or let's replace this, or this is really great. Let's make sure that they get here, or we find a way to point them at this thing, etc., etc., etc. All right. With that in mind, it is 3:25. I'm going to bring our today's session to a close. I want to thank everybody for joining me, everybody who stopped in. We had a great audience today and some wonderful discussion. I hope that this treatise on random encounters was useful for you. Again, your mileage may vary. So if you are well acquainted with random encounters and random encounter tables and they really speak to you and you have no problem integrating them into your game, terrific. Great, enjoy, by all means. I am not the gaming police. I'm not going to come to your house and take your D20s away or file off all of the corners around the high digits. However, my perspective is based on You know, the longer that you play this game and the more different games you play, the more that your viewpoint evolves around how is this an interesting play experience? What is this providing that brings something interesting and engaging to the table? I was honestly going to spend a big chunk of today talking about a story game called Fall of Magic, which I played over the weekend. Maybe I'll talk about that on Tuesday. We'll see. But you know, it's funny because Tuesday I played this very lightly directed story game where there's literally no combat mechanics. Every once in a while, you roll a d6 to help prompt the outcome of a scene. But other than that, you just decide, oh, okay, I'm going to fight this entire hall of marble statues and destroy them in spectacular fashion. And that's what happens. So that was Tuesday. I had this very freeform narrative approach to a game that I absolutely loved. We had a blast playing. And then last night I played very kind of like on the table, very tactical, very rules bound order of operations, Dungeons and Dragons, and also still had a great time. But I think the more stuff that you play and the more that you expose yourself to and the more that you learn that there's different types of experiences that you can enjoy when it comes to gaming, then I think the more that evolves your perspective. And if anything else, this is just my perspective on what I think makes for fun at the table. You can take it or leave it. It will evolve at some point. I'll be like, nah, you know, this isn't everything that I thought it was cracked up to be. But that's fine. That's the nature of playing and being an engaged and attentive player or game master at the table. Taking in what's happening, who's having fun. Am I having fun? Who else is having fun? What do we like about this? Why is this moment not working? Right? That's something I find myself attracted to, and that's one of the reasons that I have this stream. So I hope it is helpful for you. Hey, if this week's thing was not for you, great, guess what? Come back on Tuesday. I'm going to prep some more D&D, and we're going to talk about tackling the denouement of this adventure, Sunless Citadel, what story points we still have to pay off, what's been paid off in a big way, where we need to go in order to deal with the mayor and Takandell's parents. Is there fallout from Gregory's death? What's really going on with Thon's dad and the rest of the militia patrol, etc., right? So yeah, the return to Oakhurst is going to be very interesting. I feel like I need to prep hard for it because we don't really have any notes on Oakhurst. We don't have, these are a lot of like Schrodinger's clues things where they're not really defined yet, and I need to start putting some pins in. All right, that's actually going to be, is the mayor crooked, yes or no? Leaning towards yes, could give him an out. Are tax parents crooked? Leaning towards no. Can they provide more insight on what happened? Absolutely. Well, better figure that out because those are the things you can't. I struggle to improvise. Let's put it that way. All right. Let's take a look at the calendar. Ba-bow! So, tonight we have Crit Juice. Welcome to it. Grab yourself a glass of your favorite beverage and belly up to the bar with Mr. David Crittenden and the boys of Crit Juice. That's tonight at 8. Tomorrow at 8 o'clock, Black Bag Vikings continue with Mr. Wes Otis behind the helm of this epic Call of Cthulhu game. And then Saturday and Sunday, we've got the week off almost. If you're a Patreon backer at the $5 and up level, you will have an invite to a special private stream with Mr. Dom Zook that will be taking place on Saturday morning. He's going to walk you through our new studio, talk about the plan, like the improvements that we have made, the options and improvements that are available to us, maybe some of the reasoning behind why we moved to this new space, and where we're going to try and take it from here. I can tell you, like, it's coming together, but it's not done yet, right? So there's that. If you are a Patreon backer at the $5 and up level, you've gained access to our monthly fireside chat, and this month that is with Dom. If you have suggestions about things you'd like to see changed in the stream, or things that you like but you want to see more of, or what have you, if you have any input on the direction that saving throw is going and where you would like it to go next, Dom is the person to bring those things to. I appreciate all of the tremendous and dedicated hard work that he puts into the whole thing. So that is your opportunity to let your voice be heard in sort of an open forum, as opposed to just like whispering stuff or whatever during an actual stream, etc., etc., etc. Right? Like it's a much better forum for that than while he's trying to decide between camera switching, pay attention to what donations have come in, and monitor chat for what's going on. All right, ladies and gentlemen, gamers of all stripes and persuasions, thank you so much for joining me. It's been a great chat today. I look forward to seeing you on Tuesday. And until next time, let's dungeon. Yes, BSB Care, what am I up to? 135? 135 in a row!